Just loading.
Check on Facebook too.
Okay, it might be up there already.
Yeah, so let's check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to She's of Love. Today we have the lovely Rachel Rich on the show. Such a beautiful name, first of
Yes.
all. I'm pretty sure we've already talked about this, but yeah, your name's pretty cool. Um, You've been on a few times, and every single time is such a beautiful conversation, and you have such a beautiful, soft energy, and
Mm.
I look forward to talking with you every single time. Today's topic is about the inner child, which we may have already talked about with you before, but it came to me again. I actually did an oracle card reading this time to see what I'm here to
Wow.
talk about. And the inner child came up. So we must still need something, there still must be some things to talk um, about the inner child. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for this episode. Um, I guess I'll hand the baton over to you in regards to, the inner child is a very broad topic. And I guess I'll just leave you to pick at it what you will and what you want to talk about.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for such a beautiful introduction to Juliet. You always do everyone so
Yeah,
much.
she does.
It does.
She's good at it.
Yeah.
Sky.
In terms of the inner child and what you touched on just as we were opening here was my name. And for yeah, it's really, I mean, I still have my name that I was born with. I haven't never changed it. But in my childhood, it caused me a lot of grief.
Did it?
Growing up in the 80s, Claudia, you'd remember, the cartoon Richie Rich.
Yeah,
Well, I was ridiculed my whole life because of
with
my
that cartoon.
because of that
Mm.
cartoon. Yeah. So, and I didn't come from a rich background. So, I'm rich in so many other ways. I know that now, but as a child and coming from, I mean, we weren't really, 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 really poor, but there was four of us growing up in a household where my dad worked to support us, and and there was obviously families around that were a lot more affluent, and so going to school, I got, do you have a dog named Dollar, and do you have a robot maid, and well, why aren't you, you're Rachel Rich, is your brother Richie Rich, and just
Yeah,
really for it, and I struggled with it as a child, and I'm sure that my daughter does now. She hates it, because she goes, we're not rich,
yeah,
it's the money. She thinks it's all about the money. So,
yeah.
and I guess that did set a path for me as a child, to dealing with that ridicule and that shame and that embarrassment that I wasn't what my name said I was, you
Yeah, well,
know,
not in the traditional sense
traditional
anyway.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's like when we are given things in childhood to bear, like a cross to bear, like you had your surname Rich. Sometimes I feel like those things are given to us to stretch that muscle. So the fact that you're not traditionally rich brought that um, home to you all the time. People like the other kids teasing you, constantly jabbing at you. It's like the point is constantly being driven home to you, and particularly as a child, that can be so overbearing and
Mm.
such a huge burden to carry. But I think that there's gifts in that, like because we love your name. We think it's, like we think it's amazing. Um, and like when I met my husband, his name's Spencer Jones. And I thought that when I met him, I thought, wow, that's a name. Like that's such a name. And I was teasing him about it too. And he was like, oh, that's not original. I get that all the time. Like,
Yeah,
Spencer Tracy and
I get it.
Indiana
I
Jones
get
and
it. I get it really a lot because I actually really love my name, but
Mm,
Juliet Jones, first of all, so many old men making Romeo jokes when they shouldn't be.
yeah.
That's like a huge one. Like, oh my God, the second that an older guy finds out, and I'm
Where's
talking
your
like,
Romeo?
yes, I'm talking like 60 years old. And I know that it's just a fun little thing for them, but it's not for me. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
enjoy I don't
Yes.
enjoy old men asking where my Romeo is. And it's always that, where's your Romeo? And then um but I actually love my name Juliet Jones, and I'd been told that I sound like a superhero. I've been told that like I've got a really cool name like all the time. So I've grown to love my name. But growing up, God, it was so annoying.
Because it leads, doesn't it? Your name leads before you.
Yeah.
So people see the name on a list, or they see the name written somewhere, or they hear about you before they meet you, or,
Mm,
your name comes first into the room sometimes.
yeah.
And even when it doesn't, if you come into the room, that's the first question people ask you, what's your name?
Mm,
What do I call you? And so it is like, it's a big thing. And I think, like you were saying, the traditional sense of the word rich is such a, like, children, that's the first thing children are going to think, because even my son, who's turning 14 next month, when he thinks of the word rich, he thinks of show me the money.
mm,
But it's not the only meaning of that word.
That's right.
And that's not something really that you learn until you get much older. That's a
Mm.
deeper sense of the word rich,
Yeah.
because we can have a rich life. We can have rich tasting food. We can have
mm,
a rich conversation.
Yep.
It means a deep
yeah.
wealth of something.
Mm.
Yeah. And so that's, when I think of your name, that's what I think of.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That does. I mean, that's taken me a long time to grow into.
Yeah. Of course.
Well, probably. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Just it was mostly my childhood, teen years, and early,
Yes.
and I did at one point have a T-shirt that actually said "rich bitch," but the joke was on everyone else, like,
Yes.
you
I
know,
love that. That was your way of trying to own it.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but not in the way that, it was like if I was going shopping and I'd wear this T-shirt and, you could see people sizing you up going, who does she think she is? And I'd hand over my credit card with my name on it, but they just still didn't pick up on
Yeah.
it. So it was
Yeah.
actually, the joke was on them because I knew what I was actually saying.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. And the 80s were actually, I think, I mean, I watch TikToks and reels and shorts now about people talking about Gen X.
Yeah.
And they talk about how Gen Xers are like this, like, generation of people that just do not care. And I'm like, how did we get that reputation? But I think I realized that the 80s really were, it's like the toughen up era. If you survived the 80s, particularly other children from the 80s, because it could be quite cruel, like kids could be cruel to each other.
Mm. Mm.
It toughened you up.
You did.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
And
I
moving
think that,
into the early 90s, is when I joined the military as well. So it was like I got an extra dose of toughen up, So
yes. Yeah. And I can imagine for someone like you, Rachel, because I feel your softness so beautifully, and it's something in you that I admire a lot, that environment, for you to still have that softness about you even now, is, I think, incredible, because you came through that army environment to be who you are now. Like, it's
Mm.
amazing. say something because I think you're muted.
Oh, am I?
Oh,
Oh
no,
no,
you're
good.
fine.
You're good.
My daughter was just leaving, so yeah, she's just leaving the house. So
Yeah, right. Yeah, so
Oh, sorry.
no, you're right.
I was just gonna say one thing that really calls to me with the topic of the inner child, and I think it's one of the reasons why um it came up as a card, was because of the decisions that we make unconsciously that come from our inner child. Like, we don't
Mhm.
realize that, um, when we get triggered, a lot of people just don't think about the fact that it connects to our inner child, and the fact that we're like constantly manifesting from this place in us, and it can lead to really amazing, wondrous things. Like, I don't know, when you open to your inner child, like, you think about the imagination that you used to have, and that can come to life, I believe,
mm,
Yeah.
when you connect with it and create from that part of yourself. But then there's also the triggering parts, like, every time a man, actually, now it's become a reaction in me. Every time a man asks for my name, I like prepare.
Guys that
Yes. Women never do it.
yeah, right.
It's only
That's weird.
it's not guys my age usually. I mean, sometimes, but hardly ever. It's always
I think that's
men
a
like
generational thing.
40, 50, 60,
mm,
70.
Because
mm,
possibly young guys don't associate Juliet with Romeo and Juliet because maybe they haven't read it or they didn't learn it in school or something.
Yeah, but
Because Romeo and Juliet is like one of the most famous love stories.
yeah, I
mm.
know that. I
I'm not
know.
saying it because I think you don't know it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think it's just built a reaction from my inner child, and that's one way that I manifest through my inner child. Then there's other ways that, um, I go on trips and stuff, and when I'm traveling, I feel like most of the time I create from my inner child, because these experiences that I would never have concocted ever in my adult brain come
Mhm.
true, but my inner child is like, I knew that was going to happen, or like,
Mm,
I created that sort of energy. It was like, yes, of course that happened.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, in your experience, like, how do you create from the inner child consciously and unconsciously?
Good question.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is a good question. Well, I can speak to you unconsciously with just in the last few weeks where I haven't been well. And my daughter has also been sick. So my tolerance levels and us being in each other's space, I
Mm,
find that I create those reactions
mm,
when we're conversing, like, and I can, and then, but because I've had this time and space to be healing my body, I'm also picking up on those times where I'm having those reactions, which is my inner teen is really,
yeah.
really right now because she's 15. Yeah, it takes me back into certain situations where I go, oh, so there's a lot of awareness coming up in and around that at the moment. And in terms of having that more of that purity and that returning to that innocence of what the inner child can bring into the world, I guess that's where I'm still working on tapping into that and allowing that to flow in a more organic and natural way. Because at the moment, as we have been living through in these last few years as well, things have been quite intense. And so it's, for me, I guess I'm probably more in that other area where I'm responding and reacting to those parts of me. And as they're coming up, I'm like, okay, I see you. And I'm reparenting and I'm rehealing and I'm bringing that awareness in and around it and bringing myself back to when I am then going to have and converse with my daughter, that I can see where it's about to erupt and kind of
Yeah.
pull back. So for me, that is huge.
Yeah,
It's
that's
huge.
massive.
Mm.
Creating that, like having that awareness and creating the space for yourself to pivot from the trigger, like the reaction you're going to have from that triggering
Mm.
thing that's happening to you in that moment, to conscious reaction.
Yeah, yeah,
Like that's amazing.
yeah. And I don't
And
always
that,
get it right. But
no,
when I do, what I find is that I've stepped into it and I'm in it. And then and as I'm in it, I can see that it's happening, but this part of me, this inner child, still wants to have that last say, or whatever it is that's coming up at the time. But when I can see that, it's in those moments there, rather than once upon a time where I would have either ignored it and just moved on, or shoved it down, or maybe then gone to my room and had a cry.
mm,
I'm allowing that emotion to come up, but I'm also honoring what that situation has brought up for me and allowing it to move through. And then I will sit there in those moments and I'll just do the Ho'oponopono to myself and to my daughter, and to the whole, the situation. And then I'm thankful for bringing that forth and allowing that acknowledgement within me and my body. And I just sit with that and allow that. And I'm like, okay. And then I prepare myself for if it comes up again, then I see it before it happens so I don't get tripped up.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's never ending.
Yeah.
It's never
That's
ending.
that's a huge shift in energy. Like just listening to you talking about it, I'm imagining you in that moment, and the difference between pushing something down and ignoring it, which is like, shaking up a fizzy bottle and putting the lid on. That's what it feels like energetically to me.
Mm.
To then, the other choice is going somewhere private and crying it out, which I think is like the bottle just exploding, but in the bedroom.
Yeah. And in a controlled environment,
Yeah.
yes.
Um, which probably is better than it happening there and then on the spot in front of, creating a big mess in the kitchen and your daughter's there and all of that sort of thing. But that change in energy that you've created for yourself, that that's such a healing practice. And it's such a, like, I can imagine it being something that later on when you revisit that in your mind, it brings happiness, and it can bring,
Mm.
like, oh, such a feeling of relief and like a pat on the back moment. Because
Yeah.
I would, that's how I would be. Like once I'd revisited it, I'd be feeling like, oh wow, I did that.
Mm.
It might just feel like a small step, but it's really a huge
It
thing.
is, but when those little steps and they
Yeah.
start to grow, and then you can sit with, okay, because that's where I start to notice in my body, like,
Yes.
oh, in my, the back of my hip here. Okay, well, and it's loosening up, whether it's the fascia or whether it's deep in the muscle or whatever, and we start to then work, physically, and
Yeah.
we're bringing it all out, out,
Mm.
out. So we
Yeah.
can't hold on to it anymore,
Yeah,
We
exactly. I
need to
love
hold on
that.
to it anymore. And so I'm just learning how to bring it all out.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that's the feeling that I'm getting from this conversation is relief.
Mm.
Mm,
It's like,
mm,
oh, it needs to be out. It doesn't need to be trapped in my body. It needs to be out. It doesn't need to be in my tissues. It needs to be out in the ether,
yeah.
given to the universe.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and just acknowledged and seen, so that it's not this, this looping pattern that just shows up in different situations. And because it will show up in different situations, but you get to see the um, speed humps before you trip over them.
Yeah, yeah,
That's a really good analogy. I think that's why it's so important for us to communicate with our inner child is so we have that warning
The relationship.
going through life, you know, that I think so many people, well, one thing that I heard when I was a kid that stuck with me, and I didn't really realize it, that the truth, I knew it was true, but I didn't realize the deep truth of it until I myself became an adult. But one time someone told me, I was really young, like maybe 12, 13, that every adult is just a grown-up child.
Yeah.
Like they're still children. It's still adults are children disguised like by bigger bodies pretty much.
Yep.
And that's so deeply true. Like, you know, as a kid, you think that, well, the adults are supposed to protect you and they do. Your parents protect you. At least they try their best to most of the time if you have good parents. Um, but yeah, adults, I mean, I grew up seeing adults as this like they know exactly what's going on, they know everything about the
Yeah,
world.
that's so true, isn't
But
it?
yeah, but they're just children still. And I think as a society, if we became more conscious and, you know, communicate communicated with our inner child, it would be a lot more of a balanced world because some adults I try and have a conversation with or I witness their behavior and I genuinely think I had a better chance communicating with a teenager than with this adult in front of me.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so many times where I just witness their behavior and I'm like, oh my gosh, they need to figure their stuff out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I know that's a judgment on my part, but you know, when their behavior affects you, it's like,
Yeah.
you know,
Totally.
um, yeah. So I don't know. I think the world is full of children, and we're just all in different forms. Some look like children, and some look like adults, but we're all. I think every single adult is just a child inside still, and that can be a
Inside of the grown-up's
balance.
body. Yeah. So the
Yeah.
body has moved through the motions of growing.
Mm,
Yet this, you know, the inner child is still trapped in there.
yeah.
Yeah, and that can create a paradox in the world because we are treating somebody or we are making a judgment when we see them as that's an adult because of their size and their, grey hair and wrinkles or whatever. That person's lived a life. So they're getting you have made certain judgments about that person, and then they're not really,
Mm,
or they look like something, but then inside they've not as developed, or they're stuck in a certain era in their life or
mm,
whatever it is, and they didn't develop past that.
Mm.
So that can create a paradox
mm,
Totally.
sometimes.
Mm.
And I know what Juliet's talking about because I've had similar experiences where, I'm relating to somebody and they're in an adult body, but I'm like, I can't, there's no getting around this. Like
yeah.
there's no way through with this person.
Yeah.
Well, let's think about some of these, you know, CEOs and these important people running really big, you know, projects and stuff, you know, government and stuff, you know, most of
Yeah,
these
Yeah.
yeah,
people, you know, the world's being run by children having tantrums and getting their own
yeah,
way.
It's
yes. So
actually
true. It's a good way of
actually that
looking at it.
is so true.
Yeah.
And I watched this amazing TikTok of this girl and she's like my age and she's making this really good point and it's like it was around the time she posted it around the time where in England it was I think women were just it was announced that women are going to be drafted if it ever gets to that a war conflict.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Yeah.
think something about women being drafted. And so it was this huge argument, debate amongst the internet. But this girl was like, I don't think women should be drafted for war, and I don't think men should be either. In fact, I don't think we should have war. And
Yes.
I think that if you're a leader of a country and you want something, and you're not getting it, and your solution is war, then you need to step down. What are you doing? Like, there is never a situation where, you know, there is never a situation where war is the answer. And I was like, yes, this is what I believe. But every time I try and communicate, I don't think we should have war. So many people are like, oh, well, you know, what happens if we're attacked, blah, 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 and like make it seem like I'm such a naive person for thinking we shouldn't have war. You're the naive person, you're the child for, thinking that
But
we,
that's just coming from a place of mistrust
yeah, and
Coming
also,
from
and
within.
separation.
yes,
The
and
war's coming from within. Yeah.
Yes.
and thinking that, this violence, this horrible, horrible violence is an answer to anything and
Mm.
would solve anything.
That whole talking about war and the argument about for war or not for war, that whole energetic space is a trap,
Mm,
because when you get in there,
mm,
that there's no way out of it. There's no argument around it. There's no way of coming to a happy medium place. It's a trap. That is a vacuum of mistrust, yeah, separation. The fact that people are talking about it even is a trap.
Yeah,
It's
well,
you
it
just
feeds
get,
the energy. You're putting energy into this beast that just
yeah,
is, wanting to just perpetuate misery and grief and hardship, and we don't want to be feeding that beast.
yeah. And like, I see children, like, getting back onto the topic, I see children fighting when there's, that's mine, no, that's mine, all of that stuff. But, how, if we could somehow teach kids at that age, about what's mine and what's yours, and what respect is, and all of that sort of thing, and that we're not actually separate beings, that we're, when and my dad used to say this to me all the time, and I didn't understand it. I really didn't understand it until I really recently, actually. He used to say things like, when you lose, you win.
mm,
And I used to think, what is he talking about? When you lose, you win. When you lose, you lose. Um, but I realize now what he was talking about is we aren't separate,
mm,
Mm,
because when somebody else wins, you win too.
mm,
mm-hmm.
So if we could teach our children that, when you allow somebody else to have the thing, or to experience the thing, whatever it is, and you get out of the way, they're experiencing it, but so are you,
Yeah, yeah,
in a quantum way,
yes,
like it's the
yes,
cat in the box and all of that sort of thing, you
yeah,
know, and string theory, and like, if it happens here, it's happening over there as well, and
mm,
all of that, because it's true. If
mm,
if you really, what my dad should have said to me, which would have made me understand it a little better, is that when somebody else wins, you win too. You're not a loser,
mm,
yeah. It's just the
you
way
know?
we perceive those words when they're given to us, and we're trying to make sense of it. Yeah,
Yeah. So when someone else wins, we all win. And when we can understand that, that's the argument for me. That's the argument that kills the war argument,
Mhm. Yeah,
because allowing our world to experience itself without, I mean, unless you're being harmed, of course, you don't want, it's not right to go over to somebody and kill them to
no,
take their house, that sort of thing, you know, or to take
but
their
it,
country or whatever.
but it happens, as we know,
yeah.
it's happening, and it's icky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
people
really
kill
icky.
others for a lot less than a house.
Yeah.
Do it just for their own ego sometimes.
Yeah. And that then also is the wounding of that person
Mm,
coming out and manifesting into the world.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's the wounding.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, we bring it all back. It is, millions of these inner children wounded
Yeah.
children
Yeah.
that are just trying to make sense of a world.
Yeah. And have learned that by, the only way they can survive is to hurt other people.
They're other people and have power over, because that's what's constantly we're being saturated with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But Rachel, do you feel, and this was also a conversation I was having yesterday, do you feel that things are changing? People are starting to realize that their wounding is not them, that they can, that that idea of separation isn't what we think it is. Do you think
Um,
it's getting better?
I feel that there are more and more people, um, even if they don't know what it is,
Mm,
they're coming forth with I don't know, there is this sense of coming together from within.
yeah.
But I don't think they truly understand what is actually happening, but they're allowing this awareness to start permeating through.
Mm,
And I guess then they're not as armored, if that makes sense.
yes.
It sometimes it's hard to put words to, but
Yeah,
that's
because it's
sort of what I'm
you.
sensing. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and I've been sort of withdrawn from the world since about Anzac Day. I haven't really ventured too much further than my bed because I've been really, really unwell. Um, and it's so yeah, I've yet to sort of move through the world with these big energetic changes that have happened just recently too, with astrology and full moons
Mm,
and new moons and all that kind of stuff, which I
yeah.
sort of just sort of keep on the back burner, sort of knowing that it's sort of going on, but I don't sort of put a lot of energy into it. But I know it's sort of happening and around me. So I haven't really conversed much with the world outside of my own sort of bubble in this last couple, I guess 3-4 weeks. It's been
Yeah.
intense for me, as I'm moving through that, which for me, I look at it as a cellular upgrade. But I can tell you that in those few weeks, there's moments there where I've just gone, if I'm surrendering, if this is it, that, made arrangements for friends to come and check on me. And if, I'm hoping my daughter doesn't sort of walk in and I'm no longer here, because it felt
Yeah.
really, really intense. And yeah, so where were
I'm
we going?
glad, I'm glad, I'm glad, I'm glad you're still here.
Yeah, I am glad that I'm still here, but it was, yeah, really, really intense. And for me, I feel like it was a big dose of radiation that my
Yeah.
body is healing from. And how that happened, I don't know, because I don't venture too far anyway, but it's definitely been a big radiation hit, and my body is healing from that.
Interesting.
I know
Mm.
there's been some really big solar flares in the past couple weeks. But I don't think around Anzac Day. It was after
Come after
Anzac.
that, yeah, oh yeah, I felt them because I was
Yeah.
in it, but it was, I didn't actually leave the house for Anzac Day. I had my own way of moving through that, so there was a lot for me to move through as well, because it feels like after being in the military and that, because I decided not to engage, I could feel, and we're going to go back to this whole war thing, because in my body at that time, I could feel this war within me,
Yeah,
because
right.
this truth of who I am, that's, what's the word, expanding and evolving, decided that, I don't have to engage and be a part of Anzac Day because that's what my career was. And then afterwards, I felt obligated, to go to a dawn service and, do all of that stuff. And I let it go. Yet there's still people out there that think that I should attend, and I give my own, what's the word, recognition of those fallen. And I say my own sort of prayers and stuff for the fallen. Yet there was this war within me was, and I can feel it. There's still a thread of it still there. I can feel it. It's all in around the heart and the solar plexus. But because of the deep training or the deep what's it called? Conditioning.
Mm.
It's like it was this war within me, because my heart was saying, no, you don't have to, but this programmed mind, this AI programmed mind was still throwing out these, reasons for why I should.
Mm.
And it was a really, really, really uncomfortable place to sit in.
Yeah,
Mm.
because this is such an interesting conversation, because talking about Anzac Day and the shouldas and the wouldas and the couldas and all of that stuff, because there is so much built up around the respect given to the fallen and remembering the war and remembering the sacrifice and remembering, because it is such a emotionally charged time in our history, because
Yes.
it's the whole world over. It's not just Australia, it's the whole world over. When you meet somebody from the military, the respectful thing to say is thank you for your service. Like, there's a whole protocol
Mm.
that people have built around this subject matter and the people involved in it. And so it's actually massive, the pull that we feel energetically towards this idea of the people who fought in the war and lost their lives for our freedom, and all of this stuff. And I'm not coming from a place of, well, that's all bullshit. I'm not saying that at all. I'm talking about the weight of the obligation that we live with now after the fact,
Mm-hmm.
and that it continually pulls us back into the past and continually pulls us back into that energetic space of war.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
And for you to be in a process of dealing with it and untangling it in your being and in your body and in your psyche, that's a huge undertaking, because
Yeah.
those threads are long and strong and have been
Woven deep.
weaved over, yes, and being weaved into our lives over many, many, many decades.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think these generations, our generation, we tell ourselves it's good to remember it, it's good to honor it, because we don't want to go back there.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
what we tell ourselves. But I think you're right. It's time for us to move through that and grow up from that
Mm.
programming and let it go and enter into a new era of being in harmony with each other.
Mm. Yeah.
You don't necessarily need to continually be in that energetic space of war to do that, though,
That's
I
right.
believe.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, you know, Anzac Day, people go and they honor the fallen, and they have a beautiful dawn service. And I can say that for all the dawn services and stuff that I've been to, sorry, I'm gonna have a moment. Just hearing the bugle and stuff would always be deeply affected, because I have memories of past lives. I know I was there in World War II, and so there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that comes up. And now I forgot where I was going with all that. Just this feeling came through. So, oh yeah, so that Anzac Day. And so, I respect people's way of wanting to go to a dawn service and have a beautiful service and then a gunfire breakfast and all of that, but then the day goes on and on and
Yeah.
on, and it ends up in pubs and with lots of alcohol and the whole, the two up and all that. And that's, people make a massive day out of it, and that's great. I mean, I've been there and I've done all that.
Yes.
But it never felt right. Like, in the olden days, in the days where I was in it, I would, I'd be drinking and get lost in the whole thing anyway. And but I also feel that it's such a, a lot of these obelisks and stuff like that, these memorials are on important kind of grid points as well. And so people are congregating and they're giving, they're honoring the fallen, and then sort of it's almost like they're opening up these grid lines and, like you said, feeding into this past, and then they go and pull in all these other entities from drinking lots of alcohol and everything. So it's, to me, it's a big ceremony, and it's faced with something that makes people feel like you said, obligated, but in fact it's actually an inverted
Yeah, I agree.
ritual. Sorry, my words are
100%.
getting stuck.
No, I totally
I
get where you're coming from, and I agree.
sorry to interrupt you, but I just had something because
Yeah, please.
I recently went to Fraser Island and we were there for Anzac Day. And I was traveling with my friend and a bunch of her family and friends. And like her family friends, I mean. So like they were all like middle-aged, like parents, also grandparents, like, and
All
then
the generations.
yeah, and then there was just a small group of the younger people, so me and my friend, and then there was a another couple people. So it was about 5 young people, and then there was about 12 adults who very bogan Australian, like very Queensland energy. Um, and yeah, we all went for Anzac Day and it was a whole thing and they were so excited about, like, we were there for Anzac Day. It was like a 2 week holiday, but we were
Oh,
there
that was the reason
for,
for it.
yeah, like they were all making it. It was like Anzac Day was the big day.
Mhm.
And to me, growing up in the, city girl, New South Wales, I went to school in a place where Anzac Day was kind of a big deal, but not really. Like
Mhm.
Anzac Day was never a big um day. Like I'd never heard about Two Up before.
Yeah, right.
I'd never heard about Two Up, never seen it. It was just always a day
Such
where,
an Australian thing too.
yeah, I don't know, I just grew up where it wasn't a big deal. Like it was just a day where all the shops were closed and we would have a service at school and then we would go back to normal
Yeah.
schooling the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was my first time experiencing a proper Anzac Day, and it was beautiful. The dawn service was amazing. I mean, it was on Fraser Island, for
Mhm.
crying out loud. Like it was insane. But yeah, there was this big kind of, I agree with what you're saying. Like there was this underlying unsurety that I was feeling. Like, I mean, people were drinking rum and milk at like 6:37.
Yeah, it's kind of like it goes hand in hand, doesn't it? It's kind of like, oh, it's Anzac Day. It's the day to drink.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
goes hand in hand. It's the day to gamble.
It's the day to disconnect from my body.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally.
And I think what's happening now, similar to what you're saying, Juliet, because where I work with, there's all the generations. And for me, when someone talks about Anzac Day, it's very much about remembering the fallen.
Mm,
Like that's what Anzac Day means to me. But all the young people at my job, they don't talk about that. They were like, "Oh, it was so fun. I've never played two up before, and like, um, I won $100, and
mm,
it's not about it for them. The history of it isn't clear.
mm.
It was more about having the fun on the day
Yeah.
of like, and these experiences with drunk people and being at the pub and playing two up and there's no rules. Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
body, I can feel the energy just like
Yeah. And it was, and that I'm standing there hearing these stories of these young people talking about playing two up and they've never played it before and how fun it was and they won all this money and they were drinking and I was like, that's in my mind. I didn't say it out loud. I was like, why we're doing that? Like, is that part of the experience for you is the reason behind it, but it wasn't. And so for me, it's like it's turning into, I don't know if that's true, but in that moment, I was thinking to myself, it's turning into something different to what it was meant to be.
Mm. I
Yeah.
mean, the world is now coming into a place where my generation is coming into the workforce, and
Mm,
we've experienced a war of a different kind,
yeah.
and not many people even know that that war's going on. Like
Yeah.
the war on the psyche, the war on self. And I mean, that's been going on, okay, that's been going
Yeah.
on forever, and every generation has gone through that. But I feel like my
It's gotten smart, hasn't
yeah,
it?
and with the internet and everything, it's become stronger than ever. With the news, it's become stronger than ever. Um, so we've grown up with a different kind of conflict that no other generation before us can relate to. So I think it's going to be interesting seeing, you know, in within the next 10 years, because, my generation is now just entering the workforce. We're slowly, kind of entering leadership a little bit.
Becoming adults.
Yeah. And so in the next 10 to 20 years, I'm really interested to see the changes that are going to come, because I think you're going to have a lot of incredible changes, and then I think there's going to be some really scary ones too, um, especially around technology.
Mm,
But when it comes to government and war and conflict in that sort of regard, I really see my generation pulling through with some
yeah, I do.
good things, because no one I've ever talked to, never in my whole life have I ever had a conversation with someone my age and it like debating about war. It's always been, we've
That's a
always,
good thing.
yeah, we've always talked about how like very similar, very, very similar viewpoints about, maybe we would debate about, different ways to different paths instead of war, like, you know debating in that sense, like, okay, well, if it's not war, then what is it? But
Mm.
yeah,
Wow, you're having these conversations with young
we
people.
have conversations about
Amazing.
communism and stuff in primary school,
Yeah,
like,
that's so
because
good.
I was such in high school, I mean, because I really hated the idea of the rich getting rich and the poor getting poorer. And so I would have these conversations with people, experimenting with ideas, and I would say, why don't we just get rid of money? And people would be like, oh, well, we can't do that because um, this and that, and that's entering a communist society and stuff like
Because
this.
that's all we know.
Because that's all we know. Yes, I
Yeah.
know. But that's not the point. The point is we were having these
Yeah,
conversations.
it's brilliant.
So, I think my generation, at least this is in my experience, is really at least as children, we were very educated on the
And
world,
thinking
and
about it.
to extent being conscious of you know how we treat the planet. And I understand, well, with that argument, I think that's one of the avenues that I worry a little bit about with my generation, is the fear of climate change and the fear of destroying our planet, when I think we should be focusing more on living in alignment with,
Mm.
instead of being so scared of, oh my God, we're going to die, the planet's going to blow up, or like we're all going to die in 20 years. Like that's literally the behavior that my generation holds, is, well,
Yeah.
we're going to die from climate change in 20 years, so what's the point? And I think if we instead focus to align and to
On solutions
on,
rather than
yeah,
fear.
and on your, also on your own individual being and level. Like people think, oh my God, to be the best, um to save the planet, I have to go zero waste, and I can't do that, I have a family to feed, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, it's actually not. It's things about having a recycling bin, and maybe storing the recycling as much as you can, and
Just doing
reusing
what you
jars,
can.
like
Yeah.
reusing jars, or buying from a carton and putting it in your compost instead of buying milk out of a plastic bottle. Like there's very very simple solutions, and all it is, start growing a garden, or volunteer at a garden center, or there's many different avenues in which we can connect to nature. Literally just putting our bare feet on the ground is
Yeah.
Making
enough.
those small changes within your own space that then ripple out, and we want to get away from that fear, perpetuating more fear, and just getting caught in that cycle of just, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever think that this stuff is happening? Because I look at 4 years ago and what the world went through, the transformation the world went through 4 years ago. Now, with any transformation, there's going to be good and bad. And I mean, because it exists in our world, is the polarity of, the two ends. Because I find myself asking the question, what's it all for? What's it all for? What's in the end, the bigger picture? Where are we headed? What are we doing with this stuff? And I feel like this crushing the nanny state that we're living, like it's becoming more and more of a nanny state in Australia. Where, all the things that are starting to squeeze us, all the things you're talking about, Juliet, how young people are feeling that climate change is such a huge issue, and all of this stuff is squeezing us. And I think, what's it all for? What's going to come out of this squeezing feeling that we're feeling? And I look at what happened over the last 4 years, and I see it. What I see happening is people starting to ask big questions.
Yeah.
And they're starting to really look at where all of this is coming from and what we're going to do about it. Like, I really see those questions starting to cross people's lips.
Surface, yeah.
And, yes, there's this fatalist that I know people who won't have children because they think the world's going to end and things like that. There are the fatalists among us, but I see more and more people waking up out of this suburban, mundane treadmill that they're on, and they're coming to ask the questions like, what are we doing here? What is happening? I'm seeing more and more people that I know from the past who I never would have thought asking certain questions, asking these questions, like, why, like, for example, this is just one example of many, many, many examples. Recently, Singapore Airlines had an in-flight emergency, and there was clear air turbulence, and it fell 2,000 feet out of the sky. And people died in this incident. It was terrible. And clear air turbulence is not a new thing. I know, because I flew for over 20 years. It's not a new thing. And I know people who've flown for a lot longer than I have, and they talk about clear air turbulence as well. And the media have taken this incident and blamed it on climate change.
No.
They've said that the reason the aircraft dropped out of the sky was because of climate change. And so many people I know have said that's bullshit.
Oh, good.
So many people I know who I would never have thought would say it have said the media are lying to the public about this, because they know that it's not true, that clear air turbulence is not climate change. It happens.
It's a phenomenon.
And it is the reason, the clear air turbulence is the reason flight attendants and pilots tell you to keep your seatbelt buckled when you are sitting down on the plane.
Yeah.
It's the reason, because it has happened in the past where like planes have experienced clear air turbulence, which cannot be predicted. It's completely and utterly a surprise. And so, that's why you should have your seatbelts buckled when you're on an aircraft. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, people really see through they're seeing through the narrative that they're trying to push right now. And they're asking the big questions. Why are they doing that?
Mm.
Why are we being lied to?
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Constantly.
And I'm like, thank goodness for that.
Mm, absolutely.
Thank goodness.
We are seeing it. We are seeing these people, like you said, and people from our paths or people that we may have thought once upon a time may not have asked these questions, and they ask.
Yes.
So, you know, yeah, this big wave of energy of, yeah, it's happening, it's coming, and it's coming through. Like the trickle now is starting to flow more.
Yes.
Easily.
You've just said it. That's perfectly said. That's the feeling I get, is that there was a little trickle, but it's starting to become
A stream.
a
A
stream.
solid stream.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, like you said, Rachel, people don't really know
Mm.
why they're asking the questions, or
Yeah.
they feel something, but they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, you know, and everybody is experiencing it in their own unique way. I know people who know certain things and are like hugely vocal about certain things and wouldn't have a clue about something else. You know, the bigger picture isn't really in their vision yet, but they are sure of some parts, like the media lies
Yeah.
and the government isn't, you know, telling us the full story and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
I think too
they,
that the frequency fence that had been kind of blocking the soul's whispers coming through has been dissolved, and therefore their own, these questions that they don't know that they realize, or where their questions are coming from, they haven't quite made the connection that it's all about it's you, it's you, it's you, it's you, it's you, it's you. It's all,
yeah,
you know, but that frequency fence, or that blocking of that
Mhm.
deeper knowing has started to dissolve, so therefore more of their own soul essence is able to come through to communicate with the avatar and make that connection. So it's going to be a beautiful thing to witness as we move forward, but you know, there'll be a lot of turbulence.
Yes,
That is,
no pun intended.
Well, we've hit an hour.
Yes.
How,
Wow, what a beautiful conversation.
yeah, how amazing. And also another thing, we look really similar today.
Do we?
I don't know. I feel like we have
yeah,
very,
you do.
yeah.
I'm just an older version.
Yeah, anyway, sorry. That was just off topic, but I was just looking at us. It's like, oh wow.
I don't see you very often not wearing your glasses, Juliet. So maybe that's what it is too.
Maybe it's what it
Yes.
is. Yes. I
Got
forgot
it.
I wasn't wearing them. Yeah. Okay. That's mystery solved. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Rachel.
Yeah.
And as always, would love to have you on again.
Yeah.
Of course. I love our
Okay.
conversations, and I love listening to, you know, all of the beautiful conversations that you have with many people. You know, I'm not always at home to be able to sit there and comment, but I'm in the car and I'm listening and I'm loving what I'm
Yeah.
loving.
Awesome.
Amazing. That's a beautiful thing to hear.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.